In 1888, the German military responded to the French Lebel. This Mannlicher clip-loading commission rifle was based on Paul Mauser's 1871-84, with a series of updates, all done without his involvement. Perhaps because of this slight, Mauser would go on to create a revolutionary Belgian Model 1889. Whatever his actual reasons, within a year of its introduction, he had made the 1888 obsolete. But Germany would take a decade to try again, netting years of improvements into what some consider to be the ultimate bolt-action rifle. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the German Gewehr 1898 Mauser service rifle. Let's go ahead and take it to the light box. At 49.2 inches in length, this is a long rifle, and it weighs in right at 9 pounds. It feeds from a 5-round stripper clip into a staggered flush-fit magazine. It is chambered in 7.92 by 57mm. If you can't tell, it's a rotating bolt action. The story of this rifle really breaks down into two separate sections. One is the story of this particular model, with its fittings and its sight and its ammo and, just the fine details of this adopted model, the 98, as a German infantry rifle. The other story is the development of the Mauser action all the way to this point. And we're kind of working backwards on that one because the 98 is really considered the final version of the Mauser bolt action. We're going to tell the former story. The latter, one that works through numerous models over decades, that's going to come out in other episodes as we get our hands on different models. If we told it all at once now, there'd be nothing to tell you later. And honestly, it would be a whole episode on its own anyway. Alright, we will cover some basic details though, so let's take a look at this guy. His name's Paul Mauser. We could really double the length of this episode trying to do even a brief biography, so let's just go with he's very important. His first success was the 1871, which was a split-bridge, cock-on-open, black powder single-shot rifle for the German military. It would be adapted into a newer 7184, which was paired with a Cartridge tubular magazine. Then France would put everyone into overdrive when they released the Lebel 1886, as we discussed in episode 1. So Germany rushes into a secret rifle production. It's done by commission. It comes out as the Model 1888. We're actually prepping for an episode on this one, so we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail right now. What you do need to know about the gun for now is that it uses a lot of the principles from Mauser's 1871 rifle, which Germany had the rights to do, but they didn't involve him in the process, and this wounded him pretty deeply. It may have even been a major factor in what was going to come next. By the end of 1888, he's worked up a prototype rifle for the Belgians that would go on with major modification to be the Model 1889. Now, this gun is revolutionary and completely blows the brand new German commission rifle out of the water. It introduces a solid bridge with forward locking lugs and a combination bolt stop ejector on the left side. It also introduces the very concept of a stripper clip. And strangely, it stepped over to cock on close when his previous designs had been cock on open. From there, he'll make changes through the Ottoman 1890 and South American 1891, the Spanish 1893, and the Swedish 1894. Each of these are important in their own, but again, we'll get to them in more detail later. The point is, the Mauser rifle as a concept is evolving, and evolving quickly, and it's being battle tested. And Germany's still lugging that 1888 around. Around 1895, 1896, the Germans are actually looking to adopt a new rifle. This time they turn to Paul Mauser, as they probably should have before, and they're looking hard at all these changes he's made to his designs in the past couple of years. Now, there's a prototype 1895-ish rifle that he's been working on, and it gets taken in two separate directions. One school of thought is to bring it closer to the current Gewehr 88, so it's given a jacketed barrel. It's also given an unusual bayonet mount that requires a tubular hilt on the bayonet. It has a Longevizier sight, which was designed by another man. We'll get to that in a moment. And overall, it's sort of closer to his current production Mausers. This thing actually gets adopted as the 8897 and is ordered in production at Erfurt. But there's a pause. It seems like the factory might have known that the other school of thought that has been cooking for a while might actually win out. And it did. So let's go down the other side. The other side is that the Germans are considering going to a smaller caliber cartridge, so a 6mm. Now, they invest in this pretty heavily in terms of research, but they ultimately find out that the performance gains aren't worth re-equipping and messing with the supply chain to this huge degree that they'd have to go through to switch off of 7.92 by 57. But the 6mm prototype rifles are turning out to be a lot better than that 8897. They're just more robust and they're a little more modern, and he's included a couple of upgrades that we'll get to in just a moment. So at the last moment, the 8897 is merged with the prototype rifle, and merged might be a light term because it seems like the only thing that came over were the rear sights. But let's take a look at what these upgrades included using our actual adopted 1898. The receiver diameter has been increased. This is the birth of the large ring Mauser. Now, you can't see it, but inside here, the shroud has been improved and reshaped to get a better seal with the bolt face and allow the gas to vent down the left channel and out this thumb cut. Further improvements to the gas system can be found on the bolts. If we take it out, there's 2 escape holes here, and back here on the shroud, the bolt shroud rather, there is a gas shield to prevent any hot gases from getting into the shooter's eye. Also, a safety lug has been added down here. This isn't part of the locking process. People call it a third lug, but it doesn't really add locking strength. What it does is, if the 2 front lugs fail, it prevents the bolt from driving back into your eye. Also, the shape of it, again, has helped to redirect gas away from the shooter's face. Now, new to this gun is also this little pin here. Its job is to keep this cocking shroud from rotating out of battery. So if I twist on it, nothing's happening. Now, if I depress it, I can actually release the shroud, and we need to do that anyway to show you the next couple features. Another good thing about this gun is that they have decreased the distance the firing pin needs to travel in order to discharge the round. That improves lock time. Now, while we're looking at it in here, I also should probably show that on the bolt sleeve, we've gone back to a cock on open, and if you notice, kind of hard to see, but that diameter increases right at the end there to help provide easier leveraging to get that cock on open process to happen. It just makes it a little smoother for operation. Now, the last major change is probably going to be hard to pick up on the camera, but it has to do with this extractor. It's undercut, which means that there's a diagonal interaction between the extractor and the bolt body itself right at the front. So when the extractor is further forward, I've just pressed that forward, it is better locked and tighter locked to the bolt body. So that means if I'm trying to extract a difficult cartridge, the harder I'm pulling, the harder it pulls into the bolt body. Now the inverse is true as well. So if I single load a cartridge and then shove this into the action, the extractor gets pushed back out of the undercut, which gives it the room to flex outward to lip over the cartridge and not damage the extractor. That, combined with just the sheer length of the extractor, is why Mauser 98s have really long-lasting extractors compared to most other bolt-action rifles. Alright, a few more details about this gun. It was equipped with a semi-pistol grip stock. It has a half-length cleaning rod, which is threaded at the end so that it can be combined with another, although usually they use the pull-through. Mostly this was used for stacking of arms so you can make your rifle teepee. Longevizier sight, again, we'll get to it in a moment. And these originally would have come with a stock disc for marking the unit. Now, early on, this thing switched over to the Spitzer cartridge, the pointed cartridge from that round nose. This process wasn't too involved on the gun. They mostly just deepened up the grooves in the rifling, but it required refitting a new sight. Again, we'll get there in just a moment. Otherwise, mostly unchanged throughout the war. One big point of variance on these guns, though, is just what bayonet you got issued with the thing. There's so many to choose from. There is no way we have time for a complete list, but let's hit the highlights. There was the model 1898 Spike Style, the 8498 Short Pattern, the 9805 Pioneers, lovingly nicknamed the Butcher's Bayonet. Allied propaganda would cause the Germans to order these shaved late in the war. Also, some commandeered export bayonets, a variety of short dress bayonets for walking out. Many of these were sold commercially. A smattering of emergency production material-saving airsats models, usually all steel construction. For each of these, there are old and new models depending on updates, and many of the models other than the 05 also came in sawback variations for NCOs. It's a researcher's nightmare and a collector's dream. Personally, I think the Butcher might be my favorite, but I'm a little biased. Let's go take a look at the action. We'll load 5 rounds from a stripper clip, bolt forward to chamber the first round. A pull of the trigger tips the sear and releases the cocking piece. Lifting the bolt cams the cocking piece rearward. The safety is a simple circle with a cutaway to allow the cocking piece to pass through. Flip the flag to engage it. Now the cocking piece cannot travel forward. The safety also fits into a notch in the bolt body, locking the action shut. Otherwise, we're fairly familiar with this rifle, so no real extra explanation needed while we let this animation wind down. Easy peasy. Now let's ask Mae to show us it in action. While I will never get sick of hearing that gun fired, it's time to get back to the history. These guns would serve through the Boxer Rebellion and through World War I. In that conflict, they kind of proved themselves to be the ultimate bolt-action rifle of the day. Many people say of all time. They were robust, reliable, few breakages, accurate. I mean, it's everything you want to stake your life on in a rifle at that time, with one glaring exception. Remember, we spoke about how they were updated to that Spitzer cartridge. Well, the Lange Visier becomes a problem. The original Gewehr 98 rear sights were set up for 200 to 2,000 meters. When they adjusted for the new Spitzer cartridge's trajectory, the new replacement sights were shorter and could only range down to 400 meters. Now, this wasn't a big deal when you thought you were going to have long-range engagements on mostly open terrain against standing targets. But in the trenches of World War I, that 6 inches of play becomes a major factor when you're trying to hit somebody's watermelon of a head hidden in a trench at less than 200 yards. A simple solution was found by just modifying the front sight so that 400 ultimately became 150 meters effectively. Now, the other changes to the gun in World War I would include the groove finger rest, and they'd get rid of that stock marking disc and put a through hole, as it were, so that it would aid in disassembling the bolt so that you didn't crack the firing pin while trying to take it apart. The other modifications are less common. There were some stamped steel dust covers that appeared, and 25 round extended magazines called trench mags. These didn't get issued very widely, but they did exist. Now, these guns didn't just serve Germany during that conflict. A great many were given over to the Ottoman Empire as aid, and ours is no exception to that because it has a wonderful little Turkish crescent. They'll be marked right on the receiver, right up front, pretty easy to tell. They're also usually a little more worn. Now, after World War I, these guns didn't just disappear, but the Treaty of Versailles kind of limited how many were in German inventory. After 1920, they pulled a little trickery in what's known as the Car 98B. That's a separate episode, but basically the 98B is why the 98 disappears so quickly and isn't really seen in large numbers in World War II. All right, let's go over to Mae and get her impressions of shooting this thing. Okay, we've made room for Mae again, and let's go ahead and get her impressions of this rifle. I think we know how this works by now. I'll hand it over.
Thank you. Well, as far as handling went for this rifle, it's long and heavy, so I was expecting it to be a lot more difficult, but the weight distribution is fairly even, and the recoil as a result of the weight was really light. Lighter than what I was expecting, at least.
Okay, now, in addition to being the quote-unquote Gewehr 98, the particular model, this is the birth of the Mauser 98 action that we are going to see time and time again. Can you give us your impressions of that action?
Well, for the action itself, it's fairly smooth, and we actually didn't have any failure to feeds or failure to ejects for this gun, which is, for the condition of it, we thought it was going to be a lot worse. And for the trigger, take up is average, the brake is fairly quick. I thought it was easy to use.
All right, good. I understand that this is sort of because of the way our collection works with World War II, which we're not covering yet. You're used to the Mauser 98, so it's fairly average, but I mean, would you say that it is, a robust, reliable system that you would bet your life on?
You know, we have a lot of 98s in our collection, and not a single one of them has given us any trouble, unless some previous owner did something to it.
I mean, they really are, by a lot of metrics, the definition of the bolt-action rifle in terms of reliable military service. Many people consider them to be the pinnacle of bolt-action rifles. I would argue that point, but that's a separate episode. All right, what about that safety?
You know, you do have to mean it for the safety to flick it over, but I understand I'm working against the cocking piece, so that makes sense to me. And it is easy to read, so I definitely know when it's on or when it's off.
I mean, this is really an intuitive design, and when you look at a lot of other safeties from the era, and again, this is from 1871, the actual flag safety as we're used to it, that flag safety still appears on modern sporting rifles. I mean, it really is a brilliant and simple design that both blocks the cocking piece and locks the action shut, and it's very easy to read. It's beautiful, honestly. All right, so I guess we got to get to kind of the worst stuff. What about those sights?
You know, I found the sights easy to read, and if I moved it into place, it really wasn't going to come out of its slot. But my biggest concern was these little wings right here, because while I could be focused on a target, if I was trying to lead a target, I could see it being incredibly difficult with those. They block my vision.
Yeah, also, if you've got one little guy poking his head up and another little guy pokes his head up right next to him, you're not necessarily going to see him because of the way these sights are configured. Let's take another look at the photo of him actually while we're talking about it. So yeah, they're not my favorite either. All right, final question, I guess, same question as ever. Would you take it into battle?
You know, yes, I would take it into battle because of how reliable it was. Would I prefer to take it into battle? No. Like I said before, it's very awkward gun to handle in terms of the weight and the length and the sights. So there were a lot of negative points about it, but I would still take it into battle if I had to.
So you would bet your life on its reliability, but you would not be all that comfortable having to defend yourself with its configuration?
Exactly.
All right, well that wraps us up again. For those of you who are following us on Patreon, we are nearly at our break-even point to keep producing episodes. And we've actually had a couple anonymous donations that have come through outside of Patreon that have us afloat at the moment. That's not 100% sustainable, but it's definitely got us for the next few episodes. Everything's going well. Now, I'll have the totals in the comments. If you have any questions or follow up with us, again, comment below, or you can email us if you're viewing this somewhere else at a later date. And one last thing, I have a message for our good friend Jim. I love you.